extend a special welcome to everybody joining us tonight for the August 8th meeting of the Ottawa Centre RASC, and a special welcome to RASC members from other clubs joining us via Zoom across the country. Just a reminder that our meeting is in a hybrid format. We are recording the meeting for posterity, and it will be available on the ottawa.rasc.ca website shortly. During the meeting, you can use the Q&A function over Zoom to ask a question of the speaker. And just a reminder that the chat box comments that you may place in that facility can be seen by everyone. Also, an additional reminder that the raise your hand functionality is disabled. And Ottawa Centre would like to acknowledge the trust placed us by our First Nations with their ancestral lands and skies. All right, we have an interesting program for you tonight. It's pretty packed, I think. We're going to start off with Dave giving his Ottawa skies for August. Then Jean-Sebastien Gaudet is going to give us a talk on the rise of satellite constellations. Consternations, maybe I should call them that. Bojan has got an interesting Astro-Bits segment for us. And after the break, Malcolm will have a really interesting presentation on creating 3D lunar images with some of the images that you may well have taken. Quite interesting. And that'll be followed up by our usual slate of observation reports. We have a few, despite the crummy conditions in July. And Richard Taylor isn't with us tonight, so I'll be taking his slides there and showing you what the monthly observing challenges are, and we'll cap it off with any final announcements. All right, a lot of new members. We have 73 new members so far in 2025. That's awesome. Welcome to all new members, especially anybody in the crowd that's new. I hope you enjoy your stay with us. I think you'll find it quite interesting. And just a late addition to our slide deck, James Lovell passed away. And for those of you who have been following the space race and the space programs for as long as I have, you'll remember him. He's one of their most well-known astronauts. He flew twice on the Gemini missions, and also he did Apollo 8, the first manned mission to the moon. And he was also on the Apollo 13 mission, avoiding a near-death experience. So he passed away, and he was 97 years old. So yeah, interesting lad, that. All right, moving right along, we're going to do Ottawa skies with Dave Chisholm, who's currently running down the stairs. Don't fall, Dave. Otherwise, I'll have to do them. Dave's running the show for us tonight because Chris Tarrant couldn't be here. And we'll pass it over to Dave for a look at what's happening in August.
Okay. I'm up in the booth today. I hope the clicker works. Okay, so here are our moon phases for August. We're moving into the new moon tomorrow. This full moon was known by the early indigenous peoples as the sturgeon moon, and also known as the green corn moon and the grain moon. The 23rd is our new moon, and got to push the right button. There we go. Big event this month is the Perseid meteor showers, peaking on the night of August 12th and 13th. Let's go back to where the moon is. Not ideal conditions. The waning gibbous moon is going to block out most of them. However, they're quite an active meteor shower, so hopefully you'll be able to see these. These are remnants from Comet Swift-Tuttle, and you look towards the constellation Perseus. Days are getting shorter. It means we can get our telescopes out a little bit earlier as we move through the month. As you can see, the sunrise and set times. August the 19th, Mercury is furthest away from the sun, and just before sunrise, you'll be able to observe Mercury. Venus is visible before sunrise. Mars is visible in the early evening. Jupiter is visible before sunrise. Saturn's visible in the evening and through the night. And Uranus is visible in the evening and through the night, as is Neptune. And here's our cartoon of the month. There we go.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. All right. And without further ado, we have Jean-Sebastien Gaudet talking about satellite constellations.
Thank you, Paul. How does this clicker? We got the big green button.
And if you want to leave.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, so my name is Jean-Sebastien Gaudet. First time presenter, long time member. I've joined the RASC when I was first time, probably when I was in high school, and it really helped kind of foster my interest in astronomy and space exploration in general. And with that in mind, I sort of pursued an engineering degree in a university, and then managed to break into the space industry right after university, which is really, really good for me. I can have some stories about that. So really, satellite constellations is a topic that's close to my heart. I'm a satellite systems engineer by day, so this is really the bread and butter of what I do. But it's really, this topic is at the sort of the confluence of my professional life and my personal interests in astronomy. We're going to talk to you about satellite constellations, broad overview of what's going on out there, what's causing it, and how did we get there, and maybe a bit about what the future looks like. This is kind of a picture I did not take this picture, but I have pictures that are similar to this. I'm sure you guys have some as well. This is kind of what happens when you take a picture close to a lot of orbits of satellites. So to start off, this is kind of what the skies looked like for most of humanity, right? I mean, maybe not this detail. This is a long exposure picture, obviously. But for most of humanity, we could see clearly the Milky Way, natural phenomena, comets, meteor showers, aurora, things like that. We've started to lose that a little bit with industrialization and with the advent of street lighting and whatnot. So us as urban residents, or those of us who live more in the city, we're slowly losing this view, and that started to happen with industrialization. And I know many of you are familiar with the Bortle scale, for example, which measures sort of the quality of the night sky. But this started changing a little bit in 1957, obviously, with the launch of Sputnik, where we started seeing man-made objects as well floating out there, which was the beginning of the space age. Although Sputnik could be seen from the naked eye, it was most likely what we were seeing was the booster, which also made it to orbit along with Sputnik, which was a lot brighter than the satellite itself. So then the 2020s, brought us not only COVID, but also, as you've surely noticed, or a lot of you who are visual observers and astrophotographers, the rise of constellations and mega constellations, such that the view now looks a bit more like, if you take long exposure in certain areas, like this, right? This is a picture from Jeff Warner, who actually graciously sent me those pictures. I have another one of his a bit later on too, which we'll see. But this is kind of what we expect now if you take a long exposure facing a certain direction. And this is taken from a dark sky, right? Light pollution is more geographically limited to sort of urban areas. So, we can still sort of go out into the countryside, FLO or other areas, and you'll see a lot more than what you can see in the city. But the problem now is this rise of the satellite constellations is not geographically limited. This is a very dark area in Colorado, and you'd see something similar probably at the North Pole or middle of the Pacific kind of thing. So this is really seen everywhere on Earth. So I'm going to give you a bit of a description of what constellations are. I won't give you too much of a boring engineering lecture. But what are constellations? Well, essentially, the definitions, it's a group of artificial satellites, so man-made satellites that are working together as a system. And what do we mean by a system is that most satellites have a unique function, whether it's to be communications or observation. A lot of the satellites the function can be accomplished with the one satellite by itself. What these constellations do is they work together. So you have sort of a resilient system, multiple satellites working together, connected in a system on the ground. You can sort of think of it like the internet. It's not just one computer; it's a lot of computers networked together. So constellations, they've been around for a while. We think of it now as more in our pictures, Starlink and things like that. But the concept of constellations have been around for quite 40 or 50 years or more, since the 60s and 70s. I'll go through a few examples of constellations, which you may know or may not know, but very interesting nonetheless. The first is, for example, GPS. So GPS constellation it's a military constellation. Primary function is military. It's owned and designed by the U.S. Air Force, which is now operated by the Space Force. Originally designed exclusively for military use, but it's now essential to everyday life. But it is a constellation. It's 24 satellites, 24 active satellites. There's a few more on orbit spares, whatnot, because it is a very important system. And what we mean by planes is, if you imagine like the ring system of a planet, it is all in one plane. Well, here you can imagine you have 6 of them at different angles related to each other. The basic principle is you have at least 4 satellites in view, and then your receiver takes the signal from the GPS satellites, from at least 4 satellites, and then you triangulate your position. But it's a passive. Your receiver is passive only. You're not transmitting your position to the satellites. You are just taking a signal emitted by the antenna on the satellite and triangulating your position. And that's done with a very precise atomic clock. So every one of those satellites has an atomic clock on board. Navigation is its most visible use, other than the military, of course. But there's a lot of other applications for example, precise timing and time stamping for like financial transactions, for example. And also in the modern times, it's used for network synchronization for other constellations, other satellite constellations. But this is a type of constellation called a PNT, we call it position, navigation, and timing. There's several others, European Galileo, Chinese Beidou, for example, which are accomplishing essentially the same function. Another constellation you may be familiar with is the Iridium constellations. Those are the ones you used to see iridium flares from back in the day. You'd be able to predict flares, and we get very bright for a small period of time. So those were 66 satellites total, 66 Iridium satellites. Interestingly, the original plan for this constellation was 77 satellites. So 77 being the atomic number for Iridium. That's where the name came from. But it got cut down to 66. So this is a picture of the first generation Iridium satellites. They have now all been decommissioned and replaced, but the flares you used to see were actually reflections off the main mission antennas. There's 4 antennas. So basically a giant mirror, very reflective mirror, and you would get those reflections straight towards you on the ground. So another constellation, there are many, I'm just go through a few examples, are the RADARSAT constellation satellites. So this is the 3rd generation of Earth observation satellites by the Canadian Space Agency. So this is a small constellation. It's basically just one plane of 3 satellites. And they have a very high revisit rate, so they're covering about 90% of the world's surface up to 4 times a day. So you have a high revisit time you can observe before and after for an event. And this type of constellation is a Earth observation. So you have a few other ones, Planet, Maxar, World View Legion, for example. So they're very useful in agriculture, natural disaster response, and also current conflicts. If you've seen some news that in Ukraine, they can go very quickly see battle damage assessments and things like that. And so this is this is one of the RADARSat constellations. There's 3 of them, but this is one of them just I think finishing or about to undergo thermal vacuum testing, space environment testing at the David Florida Labs in the Shirley's Bay. I recognize a few of my colleagues in there. So. But the real constellation we're all worried about as astronomers, visual astronomers or astrophotographers is of course, the Starlink constellation. So you may think of it as just internet at the cottage. You may have heard it's related to Elon Musk. Well, it is owned by Elon Musk, and you do get internet at your cottage. But what the actual system looks like in space is the following. So it's I wrote here multiple planes of a gazillion satellites, but they're adding some every few days, basically. There's about, I think, it's funny because when I originally wrote my notes in mid-July, I think there was maybe 7,600 satellites. I think there's now 8,000 total active satellites. So that's a lot. You're guaranteed to have some overhead at all times. There's several, like I was saying, the planes. There's Starlink has several configurations. So for me as a trained, somebody who works in the field, I can notice a few things right away. I can, classic mistake on the pointer. Notice a few planes. So you see here, there's a few different shells. So they kind of peak at 43 degrees here, peak at 53 degrees here. There's some in sort of a more polar orbit. And if you look closely, you'll see some of them are maybe a bit more lined up like this. You see a few trains here. So that's the recently launched satellites. We used to be able to see all the Starlink train of satellites. Sometimes you see a dozen of them come up from the horizon. So those are satellites that are just still being launched. Maybe they were launched a few weeks ago or whatnot. They're still sort of maneuvering into position into the whole system. But so that's basically what Starlink looks like. So if we come back to the previous picture that Jeff forwarded to me, so we can see it clearly. So he's identified actually the different shells that we see. You see here, these are all Starlinks at 53. Well, they come in at different angles depending if they're rising or which place in the orbit they're coming at. And then you have some of the other ones at 43 degrees. This is the inclination relative to the equator. You have some that are just recently been launched. So this would be a train of satellites. And then you have all the other stuff. You have debris, rocket bodies, and all this. So it's really, really dense out there in modern times. Interestingly, when I was in high school, I did a project on satellites, and back then you were most likely to see spent rocket bodies in orbit than actual satellites. Although recent regulations, the companies are a bit more sensitive to that, so they do try to deorbit the upper stages when they launch. So, and this is showing you those Starlink satellites, what they look like inside the rocket. So I thought it was very interesting. There's 60 satellites stacked up. There are 2 stacks of 30 side by side. So they're all sandwiched and like just pizza boxes, basically one on top of each other, stacked into the rocket. When they come off, we've all seen this kind of trail, but this is what it looks like just before being released in orbit. And this is on the bottom right. Here's a ground picture, a picture from the ground of one of the Starlink, newer generation of Starlink satellites. They've gone through several iterations. This here is a what we call V1 version of the Starlink. They're smaller. The one on the bottom right is what we call the V2 Mini, which is actually quite a bit larger. They only fit about 25 to 27 or so on a rocket now per launch. They are heavier. But I called V2 Mini because they actually have another generation called V2, which is supposed to be a lot larger than this one. So from that perspective, it's not going to get better. And sort of what the near Earth space environment looks like, it is not good. So you see there's lots of active satellites, way more than in the 80s and 90s. There's more incoming, and coupled with that, there's a ton of space debris. So a lot of defunct and older orbiting satellites, like I mentioned before, upper stage from rockets. For a long time, I guess we weren't very good stewards of the near Earth orbit environment. The regulations are changing, but there's still a lot of floating debris that will take hundreds to thousands of years to re-enter, or maybe not re-enter at all. So what are the impacts on astronomy? I mean, we know these satellites, they're bright. Some of them are very bright. Some brighter than others. A lot of factors affect the brightness, such as how the satellites are built, what kind of materials are used, altitude, and size. For me, they used to be a bit more of a curiosity, and now they're an annoyance for a visual observer, anyways, or for an astrophotographer. They also emit unwanted radio signals. So, emissions from space, radio emissions from space are very regulated, but there's so many now that they're sort of outpacing the regulations, and as we found in some Starlink satellites are emitting signals and frequencies that are just not supposed to. Things like onboard electronics that are sort of leaking radio emissions in unwanted radio bands. But the thing is, the bottom line is they interfere. I'm not just referring to Starlink here, but those constellations are interfering with both professional and amateur astronomy. Forgot to mention here, we're also starting to worry about atmospheric pollution. I mean, some of these satellites, for example, the Starlinks are re-entering at re-entering the atmosphere at a rate of 2 to 3 a day or so. And there's going to be more and more re-entering. So they're starting to look at effects of, the metal vaporizations and things like that effect on the atmosphere. So the main effect that we see, anyways, is optical astronomy. This is a picture from I think 2021 from the NSF astronomy. National Optical Infrared Astronomy Research Laboratory, is a long name, but it's a single exposure and a set of trails, and those satellites are basically fifth magnitude, so they're dim, but they're still quite visible. And this was taken, and from what I understand, it's a similar field of view as the Vera Rubin Observatory, which is supposed to observe the entire sky, looking for near Earth objects, asteroids and the like. So when what this does is these satellites are so bright they sort of blow out the receptors on the CCDs and the cameras. So, I mean, as a systems engineer, I can explain to you a bit why they are bright. So, there's two main factors. There's the solar panels and the radiator panels. So in space, there are several ways to generate electricity, right? To power your spacecraft, you can use batteries. Obviously, those have a limited time to discharge quite quickly, although they are used on every mission because you have your satellite most of some time. I mean, half the orbit goes behind the Earth in a shadowed area from the sun. You can use nuclear power. For example, some space probes that go far out into the solar system there's not enough incident sunlight there, so you use sort of radioisotope generators using the decay heat of plutoniums. Voyager Pioneer missions were using those kind of generation ability. But the main one is solar power. So you have a lot of sun up there. It's not attenuated by the atmosphere, so you collect that sunlight and you generate electricity. But you also need a lot of surface area to do that. And there's no wonder the ISS is basically the brightest object out there. It has enormous surface area of solar panels. It's just very, very reflective that way. And then you have the radiator panels. So in space, things get hot, things get cold, but you need to keep all the electronics at a very stable temperature. Otherwise, things don't work well. For example, my iPhone, if I leave in the hot sun on a sunny day, it's going to warn me that it's going to shut off because it's too hot. You just won't be able to use it. Same thing happens with satellites, and you usually can't afford for it to shut itself down. So every exposed surface must be carefully designed, to keep the thermal balance, and that's what you see here. The materials used, mylar or reflective tapes and things like that, or mirrors, literally optical mirrors. On the left, you see here, this is the RADARSat, probably I think RADARSat 2 being tested. It's a nice picture with a reflection of the Canadian flag, but it just shows you how reflective it is, really. It's reflecting off the adjacent wall. So there's several mitigation techniques. Now this is data from the Starlink satellites, mainly because it's one of the only constellations that have gone through multiple designs and multiple iterations. They're just launching so often that you have that chance to iterate on the design and techniques. What we're mainly trying to do is reduce the specular reflections, right? The incident light reflecting directly to you like a mirror, and instead turn into more of a diffuse reflection. The graph on the left will show you sort of like the original first constellation, so magnitude adjusted to 1,000 kilometers, just keep everything on the same level. The satellites are not all at the same altitude. So you have here the sort of a baseline, and then VisarSat would, what they introduced was sort of like a visor that would basically hide some of the reflections directly to Earth. And then they got away from that design and they moved more to a materials sort of mitigation, where they use slightly darker materials and try to reduce reflections that way. On the right, you see knife edge configuration. Basically what that is it's a different way of flying the satellites. So the satellites, they're not tumbling, right? They're very well controlled throughout their orbit, and you can program them, you can command them and orient them in such a way that they don't reflect, directly to the users on the ground. And the second, major impact is the radio interference impact. So here you have all sky view from a decade apart, from one on the left from 2014. If you guys know what a geostationary satellite is, well, they're all in sort of an arc right above the equator of the Earth. So that would be that geostationary arc. You have all those satellites that are transmitting for, you have weather satellites, you have TV satellites for Bell Express View and DirecTV and all those other companies. You also have a few here and there satellites, but like very, very little, very, very few. This is actually a picture taken in the main communications band of satellites. So it's not that they're not allowed to transmit. They're doing what they're regulated to do. But astronomers still like to use those frequencies. They like to use all of the spectrum sort of to do their observations. So as they're regulated to operate in that band, the radio astronomers could sort of work around it and still manage to do their research. But on the right, you see the advent of constellations. All those communication satellites are really starting to they're sprinkled everywhere. They're moving. They're just it's hard to avoid them, just as it is for visual astronomy. So then, really, how did we get here? Why are there so many satellites starting at 5 years ago or so? And really, it's because of the Falcon 9 rocket. For since the beginning of the space age, you can see here's a sort of baseline, 60 to 70 launches a year on average, and then it dipped in the 2000s. Maybe the market wasn't doing as well back then. And then, 2010, 2015, you're still at sort of that baseline level. But all of a sudden, 2020, 2019, you see a large spike, and that just correlates with the Falcon 9 rocket. The fact that we can now land a rocket, first of all, and then reuse it very quickly within a few weeks. The rockets launched, I think there's one model or one of the rockets that has launched up to 29 times. So they're reusing it and launched 29 times. I mean, that's unheard of. That sort of plays to Elon Musk or SpaceX's vision of rockets being sort of like airplanes, where if you want to ship something across the ocean to the Europe or Japan, you're not going to throw away your Boeing 747 once it gets there. So you get to reuse it. But that really pushed the price to launch satellites or payloads. Payloads here, it's another word for satellites in this case. Really pushed the price of launching down such that all these constellations now are affordable, relatively affordable, as a business case for these companies. I used to like taking a bit of time out of my day to watch rocket launches. They were once a month, once or twice a month or something. But now they're every few days, so I can't keep up with all that. And this correlates as well with the number of satellites launched. If you look on the graph, I don't want to bore you with graphs or anything, but this yellow line is there's 10 to 25 satellites per launch. So you're not launching one satellite at a time anymore. You're launching a lot of them. So that's what I have for now. I mean, perhaps I'll have a follow-on presentation at another time on a similar topic. There's a few resources there. So the visualizer I got the Starlink constellation from. There's a few other constellations. So a site there for past predictions, so you can see whether it was a Starlink or something else that you saw. And the last one is probably the most relevant to this, is the CPS, the International Astronomical Union Center for Protection of Dark and Quiet Skies. So it's a center from the IAU that's advocating for dark skies and radio-free interference. So yeah, happy to take some questions.
There's two online. Can you see them on your screen there? They're on the screen behind you.
Okay, yeah, I'll see them here as well. So first question, with that many satellites in space, has there been any satellites taken out due to space rockets being launched? Maybe not due to space, to rockets being launched, but there have been collisions. There have been a few collisions. There's been some intentional collisions, for example, anti-satellite tests with missiles. The Chinese did one, the Russians and Americans. But there has been some collisions. It's a very serious concern at the moment, and there's an organization. It's called in the U.S. I think it's CSPOC. I believe it's called. Some might not. It's not exactly my field, where they do track all these satellites flying about and will issue warnings to others to do these maneuvers. Okay, so the second question, I think there's two that are somewhat similar. So can you talk about the Kessler syndrome effect? It sounds like sooner or later a significant satellite collision will take place, spewing an enormous amount of space junk, which will create cascading collisions. We could reach a point where we can no longer launch anything because of the risk. That is definitely a concern. But modern satellite designs, we need to take into account. So if we design a satellite, we have a certain amount of fuel. Your satellite must be able to maneuver out of the way of other satellites with adequate warning. And all satellites being launched to get there, it's a very highly regulated environment. To get a launch license, you must have a plan to deorbit your satellite. So if you launch a constellation in low orbit, you need to prove to the regulators that your satellite is able to be deorbited or will passively deorbit itself, but below a certain amount of years. So it's 25 years, I guess, is the time if you don't have any contact with it. Otherwise, it's something like within 5 years, it has to be able to deorbit itself. So, but that's not quite keeping up the pace with the amount of satellites being launched.
Any other
questions from? Okay.
Okay, thank you. I know you've mentioned in your talk that there have been mitigating circumstances where the reflection could be dimmed a bit, where you can rate. Could any research on really dimming it further to really benefit visual astronomy, or is that just impossible?
No, there's research being done, and I can say from from a satellite manufacturer's perspective, it's something that's looked at in the design. But to my knowledge, there's no regulations it's nothing forcing these companies to do so. So it's sort of like on a stewardship best practices basis. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's hard to. You can't design a black satellite, otherwise it just doesn't work thermally, sort of thing. So it comes down to the design and altitude to a certain extent, things like that. But
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any others? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly a timely and informative presentation. I know talking to anybody that observes the night sky, they're going, what happened? How did we let this happen? So thank you. That was good. All right. And we have an Astro-Bits segment. Are we online?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me share my screen. That is the wrong screen. Okay, perfect. And you can hear me in the hall?
Yes, we're good, Bojan.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So this will be just a quick 10-minute update on what's new in my collection. There's some friends, there's some scopes, and maybe some other things. So it's going to be perhaps less about astronomy, but I guess the friends and the experiences that we have in astronomy. It won't be very technical, so let's get into it. So last year, I picked up this telescope on the left here. It's a Takahashi Muon. It's the 10-inch version. And this is advertised basically as having contrast for visual astronomy similar to a refractor, just due to the design that I'll get into in a bit. This on the right here is a Takahashi doublet. So a couple weeks ago, I was trying both out side by side and just comparing views and exploring how each one worked. So this one on the left, the Muon, I actually purchased from someone in Atlanta, but it seems to be that the nicer scope that you have, the less you want to actually ship it. So the guy in Atlanta was adamant that he did not want to ship the telescope for me. So I do what I do in these scenarios. I open up Facebook and I just type in friends in Atlanta or friends in wherever city this thing is. And then I ask that friend for a favor to go visit this person. I send the person the money, and then the person just puts the scope in the mail for me. So that's how this Mulan made it to me. A close friend, Stephen Ramsden in Atlanta, he runs the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project. He went out and picked this up for me because the seller didn't want to ship it. He put it in the mail for me, and I've had this scope for about a year, but it doesn't get much love, and I'll let you know why soon. On the right here, this is a doublet. It's an awesome refractor. It's primarily made for visual, and it just works great. But similar story, it was in Montreal a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't make the drive out to Montreal, so I asked a friend in Montreal who picked it up for me. And then when he drove to Ottawa the next time, he just brought it over. So I have a lot of these sort of asynchronous purchases that happen from around North America. So the Mulan is this Del Kirkham design. It's a unique type of design. It's got an ellipsoidal primary and a spherical secondary up here at the front. And the reason those things are important is these are easier to manufacture in a certain way. So they're perhaps cheaper to manufacture, but you also get a lot more magnification out of a scope of this size. So this is actually a 3,000 millimeter focal length at f12, which is huge. And it has terrible off-axis performance. It's designed basically for planets and lunar. It also has this interesting design choice here, which is a baffle. So this is like a tube that comes from the back and goes all the way into the telescope, almost like 50% of the telescope. And that is a light baffle to prevent stray light from making it back to you. The other design feature of this type of telescope is the secondary obstruction is 29 to 31% in size of the primary, while a normal SCT is at about 38%. Now, that doesn't sound like much. What is that? A 7-8% difference. But that difference in secondary size actually allows you to get similar contrasty views to a refractor, but without the complexities of a 10-inch refractor, which would be many feet long and very heavy. So that's the theory about why this telescope should be awesome. So what did I see when I was out there? I saw the most horrendous views I have ever seen visually. The scope I thought was collimated, and I really tried my best to collimate it, but no matter how much I fiddled with it, it looked like this here on the left. So it has to have like a push-pull system. So you have to loosen one screw to loosen that side, and then you can push or pull the mirror in any of the three directions that you have the set screws. And it's just very difficult to get a good view. Also, I was seeing an immense amount of heat plumes. So the scope came from inside to the outside. I was outside for 4 hours, and still after 4 hours, I could see heat plumes coming, what actually is coming from the baffle inside. So here's me trying with a fan to desperately cool the Mulan. You take the back cover off, you expose the primary mirror, and you just blast some air at it. And the collimation as well is another factor, and that's due to the mirror design and the 3,000 millimeter focal length, which is very difficult to deal with. So the heat and the collimation are something that I needed to deal with. So how do you fix this? Takahashi is aware that they perhaps didn't design this part properly, so you can pay Takahashi $400 for a new backplate that has holes in it, and you can mount fans directly on it, and then you can cool your Mulan primary mirror. But remember, actually I'll go back, the baffle inside of here on the right also soaks up heat. You take it outside where it's cooler, and then it releases heat directly into the line where the light path is. And you can see those heat plumes visually very easily. So you actually need to design this type of turkey baster solution, which is a fan that gets inserted inside the scope, and it blasts air at the baffles to ensure that the whole baffle system comes to equilibrium quickly enough. So Mulan has a $400 solution US, and there's a $200 SCT cooler, and that's $600 US for cooling your telescope, basically. Or you can start 3D printing. So this was my approach. You get a friend with a 3D printer, which is free. You get a set of digital calipers off Amazon for 15 bucks. You learn how to 3D model online, and then you buy your friend lunch in the amount of 10 bucks to print the thing that you just designed. So I actually ran the numbers for you. The bottom solution is significantly cheaper than the top solution. So I opted to go with that. So in my engineering degree, we learned how to do 3D CAD, and I absolutely hated that aspect of the program. The CAD tools we were using a decade ago just were not intuitive to me. It was very difficult to model anything, even simple like this. But the software has come such a far way, and it's free, all online. It's called Tinkercad. You can just go online and everything's within your web browser. I made this part on the right-hand side in about 20 minutes, and I had never used the software. If you really think about it, this is just one giant cylinder, and then the hole to sort of hollow out the cylinder is just another cylinder. And then these holes for the fans and the central eyepiece socket are also just cylindrical holes. So it's really just a matter of measuring and then using the software to model up this part. And yeah, no exaggeration, this took me about 20 minutes to do. The one on the left, the turkey baster, if you will, is also took maybe an hour worth of work. And that's just a bunch of holes in a tube such that when the fan mounts at the bottom part of this, you have a cooling solution. And believe it or not, it worked on the first try. So with 3D printing, there's some gotchas, there's tolerances in mind, but luckily my friends with the 3D printers were like, hey, I know my 3D printer, therefore make your tolerance this if you want a friction fit or if you want just a loose fit. So I bought these fans, pulled out the calipers. That's how I used to measure the holes, used some hot glue gun and a little controller here to mount everything. And here it's just a 120 mil case fan on the right for the turkey baster solution. So this is how far the turkey baster goes into the telescope to cool it, and all the holes are for the airflow to pop out. And this is actually how the cover turned out on the back. It fits perfectly. And here are the fans mounted on the back. And then I just added a 12-volt adapter such that when I mount it to my scope, I just plug in the 12 volts, and then we can control the fan speed. So here it is working. Turkey baster is here on the back, blowing air into the tube, and then the potentiometer that I'm twiddling allows me to control the fan speed. So if I want to keep cooling the scope while observing, I don't need them on 100% cooling speed. I can just pop that in. So that was a quick summary of that adventure. This adventure was, I want you to, I guess, remember back. Have you ever regretted selling something? Was it maybe regretted moving from a house that you loved, or regretted selling a telescope or a camera? And when you're handing over the item or the thing, you're kind of sad. You're like, why am I doing this? Like, I feel compelled to do this, but I feel sad at the same time. So for me, this was about 7 years ago. I had a Lunt 152 telescope. And at the time, they used a slightly heavier tube than they do now. So the whole scope weighed 35 pounds. I lived in a condo. It provided beautiful views, but to set it up, I would need to haul out a C-gem mount the scope. There were seeing considerations. The scope is very large, 6 inches. So you're limited by how much you can actually see during the day because of the aperture. So even though I loved the scope, I decided to sell it because I just couldn't justify keeping it. So here was a picture of me putting it in the mail about 8 years ago, and I was so sad that I was giving it away. Such that all these years I was like, you know what, I really want that scope again. But these things are a rarity and they don't pop up often. So luckily, about a month ago, a gentleman on Astro-Bits says, I have a Lunt 152, but he's only wanting to trade. And I'm like, hey, how much money do you want? And then you can take the money and you can buy the thing that you want to trade for. And he said, I don't want the hassle of selling the scope and looking for the other scope. I only want to trade a Lunt 152 for C14 Edge. And I'm like, okay, I don't have a C14 Edge, so I'm a bit limited in how much I can help you. And he is adamant that he will not sell the scope. And he's in Keswick. So I didn't know where Keswick was, but I was adamant to make this work. The gentleman on the right has a C14 Edge for sale. He's in South River, which I also don't know where that is. And this idea created in my mind that what if I go buy the C14 Edge for the guy on the left, and then I drive it to him, and he gives me his lunch, and I give him the C14 Edge, and then I have my dream scope again. So I asked the guy with the C14 Edge for pictures, because he had no pictures listed. And if you've ever bought a used telescope, you expect to see one thing, and that is, what is the quality of the optics? So I asked for pictures of the C14, and he sends me the pictures you see on the left. And that's right, that is a picture of a laptop screen that contains a C14 amongst a sea of telescopes. So sometimes it gets frustrating when you're buying used things and you're trying to assess whether you actually want it. Is the C14 good or bad? No one knows. That's how I felt on the right-hand side. So the plan came into fruition. I didn't tell the person on the right what was happening because I didn't want to confuse them. So I would drive to the guy in South River with the C14. I would deliver the C14 directly to the guy in Keswick. And then I would come home with my lunch and problem solved. The gentleman on the left agreed as well with the lunch. He was very appreciative that I was going out on a limb for him, basically, because I was carrying some of the risk. My wife was like, what on earth are you doing? What if the guy doesn't have a C14? Or what if the guy with the lunt doesn't like the C14? I'm like, worst case scenario, I just resell the C14, and I went for a little casual drive. The casual drive was 1,000 kilometers round trip. So South River is up here south of North Bay, near Lake Nipissing, and Keswick is down on Lake Simcoe. And the gentleman with the lunt, he has some mobility issues, so he wasn't comfortable meeting me halfway. He said, I can't spend 6 hours in the car. So I'm like, okay, well, on a Saturday, I can do an 11.5-hour drive. So I asked my wife, who was 30 weeks pregnant at the time, if she wanted to join me, and she said, are you insane? So I set out on this little road trip on my own. And I arrive in South River, and the gentleman with the C14 wheels the C14 out of a cold garage out into the bright sunlight on a hot, dewy day. And what do you get when you take cold optics and expose them to a humid environment? The whole telescope clouded over, including the primary mirror. And there's nothing that looks quite as horrendous as a telescope optic that is clouded over, because you can see every imperfection, any little scuff. Everything just looks really really quite horrible, like someone puked on it, basically. So I realized what was happening. I realized that the C14 had just dewed over, so I had to wait to see how it actually looked like. If anyone's curious how long it takes a C14 to acclimatate while you're just standing there without any fans or anything, it's about 45 minutes. So we just stood there for 45 minutes watching the dew slowly get off the corrector. I sent the pictures of the good scope in the end. And the person with the lunt agreed. And then I purchased it. This was me with my snack station as I'm driving. The key on these long road trips is to absolutely not stop. So I had my wife actually like guiding me on Google Maps. She's like, okay, stop here. There's some food that you'll enjoy. Get it in the car. Here's a little like fruit stand on the side. And I basically just drove. So I left Ottawa at 6 a.m. and I got back home at 9 p.m. So it was about a 15, 16-hour day. And that is how I got my Lunt 152, or another Lunt 152 back, by playing this little game of shuffle. So that was all in one day. The gentleman got the C14 that was his dream scope, and I got my dream scope. We're both very happy. He was so impressed by this that like he invited me back to his house whenever I want to do astronomy. If I need to crash in Toronto or Keswick, he would help me out. So all this journey also, I made a new friend. I don't image. I don't even have a monochrome camera. This is a color camera through the Lunt with 152. It's a terrible picture, but it just shows that the detail is actually pretty good, even considering those situations. So I told you like how I fixed my Mulan, or tried to fix my Mulan, and how I have this new scope. And you're probably asking, well, did it work? How is the performance improved? And the answer is, last week, I was joined by a new family member. Some of you have heard about this. So we welcomed our little baby girl into our family. So in 5 to 10 years, when I have free time, I hope to have an update to this presentation on how any of my solutions or telescopes work. And that's everything I wanted to cover. Any questions?
That was that was awesome, Bojan. As they say, life is a journey, right?
It's all about the journey. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right. Hello. There we go. All right. So we've got time for our mid-meeting break. Give you about 10 minutes or so to get a stretch and hope you had a good stretch and a good chat. We're going to roll along here. So before we get into our next presentation, just a reminder of a few of the benefits of becoming a member. As you all know, possibly for some in the audience there, that you don't have to be a member of the RASC to attend our meetings. They're open to everybody. But there are certainly benefits involved in joining us. The biggest which is the people that are involved there. These are people of like mind, and definitely if you're interested in astronomy and you like to chat astronomy or just learn and pick brains there, you'd be in good company. We've got a lot of good people here. We also have the Ted Bean Loan Library, which is a really interesting arrangement that we have going, where you can borrow a telescope. If you're new to this game and you're contemplating buying a telescope, but when you look around, you don't know where to start, the Ted Bean Loan Library gives you a try before you buy opportunity and can save you a lot of grief there. So find the type of instrument that you like. We also have the book library, Estelle's book library, which is in the back here, and we have access to things like FLO, which is our premium observatory site there, where we have 3 telescopes in service that are open for use by members only. All right. In addition to those things, there's documentation that comes with it. We get our monthly astro notes prepared for covering things currently that have happened in the last while, especially in the meetings. These are done by Gordon Webster. We have and Doug. I thank you for the nudge. We have the journal printed by or produced by the RSC, and that comes out. It's bi-monthly, I believe, currently. And we have the Observer's Handbook, which is has been under publication for I don't know how many decades, but it's a wealth of knowledge in your hand there, especially when you don't have internet access because you've set up somewhere dark away from internet connections. It's a nice handy reference. All right, and we also have sidebar benefits as well in terms of being a member gives you access to our Discord servers. This is only open Discord server. This is only open for members, and it provides a forum for discussion on astronomy related issues, and also to trade images and stuff and that you'd like to post. You also get an Astrospheric Pro access, which if you're not familiar with that, it's a program that produces current weather information and other information that is pertinent to setting up, for instance, an observing session, making a decision whether you want to, drive an hour to go place X there and find out if place X is going to be suitable for your skies. Like I said, there's a free version of that, but the pro version contains much more additional data, and is usually, if you want to get that not as a member, is $66 a year, but that comes free with your RASC membership. So yeah, up to 80 folks and counting on that. So the membership fees are as follows. The regular membership is $113 per annum. We have family memberships at $107.50 plus $15 for every additional adult and $9 for additional youths. We also have a youth membership for students and the like. All right. Next up, we have Malcolm Loro going to talk about creating 3D lunar images and videos. I looked through your slides here. I'm really looking forward to this. This looks totally cool. There you go.
Green to advance.
Yeah.
And
the small green for the laser.
okay.
All right.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Glad you could all make it tonight. This presentation, I'm hoping, is got a little something for everybody. There's a bit of science. There's some astrophotography, a little bit of history, and a bit of entertainment in here as well. It's going to be in two parts. In the first part, I'm going to talk about how you can take your own lunar images or any other lunar image that you might have and turn it into a 3D visual, basically build a 3D model, and then look at that either as a picture or create a video from it. And then when I was doing this, I thought, what would be really interesting is to go back and look at all the Apollo sites and revisit kind of what was the terrain like and look at that in a little more detail in 3D. This is a result of a time I went down a rabbit hole, and I think we've all done this. This is the kind of the case where you go online maybe to find some replacement parts for your barbecue, and you end up watching like 70s prog rock videos and wondering, how did I get here? And I did that. Somehow I ended up here, and it is the solar system meeting of a Finnish amateur astronomy society that took place in 2021. And I think this organization is probably much like our organization, but the Finnish version of it. And so I was kind of interested, and I took a look through the agenda. And one of the items on the agenda was this: creating interactive 3D moon models with QGIS. And I had no idea what QGIS was, but I was intrigued, and I looked, and there was both a Finnish video presentation, which didn't really help me too much, but also a PDF, which you can understand. And in that, the author, Tommi Ropponen, was showing how you could create 3D images, kind of like the one you see on the right on the screen there, from your photographs. So down below is a link where you can find this. If you're curious and you don't speak Finnish, that 22-character name stands for Solar System Meeting. So what do you have to do? Well, there's kind of two parts to the recipe, two ingredients to the recipe, and then a mixer, I'll call it. The first ingredient, you need a lunar photograph. So what it is going to do is it's providing the picture that you're interested in, and the photograph itself contains all the surface color, the contrast, the textures, the things about the picture that make it interesting. With that, you're going to combine it with something called a lunar DEM, and a DEM is a digital elevation model. And the elevation model provides the surface topography of the moon. So what we're going to do now is we're going to marry our picture with information about elevation at every point in that picture. And that way we're going to confer to our picture the three-dimensional kind of heights of everything that you see. And I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what the DEM is and where we find those. And to do this, we need a piece of software, and the software used for this kind of thing is typically a geographic information system. And they can be very sophisticated. This is QGIS. What's nice about it, it's free and open source, so you can just go online and download it. And it is suitable for the full-blown professional cartographer down to just the hobbyist who wants to do a few things. And that's the category we're in. One of the things you'll need is a plugin in this with the simple name of QGIS to 3JS plugin. And what that does is it actually takes the 2D map model and turns it into 3D. And we'll see how that works. So I decided to give it a try. And on the left, yes, on your left, is a photo I took of the moon. This was kind of my favorite photo of my favorite area of the moon. This is Mare Imbrium area where we can see Plato up top, the Apennine Mountains down below, Cassini crater. There's lots of detail and interesting stuff here, lots of different relief. And I thought, okay, well, this will be a good candidate to give it a try. And on the right, I found that same region in a DEM, in a digital elevation model. And so I took those two, combined them together, and turned my photo into this, which was somehow now draws out, the relief and all the detail associated with what was a two-dimensional image. And what's really interesting about this is what I've actually created here is a three-dimensional model. And because it's a model, the model can be manipulated, and you can look at it from different angles and different perspectives. So here, you can picture yourself, the camera, sitting above the Apennine Mountains, down here in the bottom, looking north across the Mare over towards Plato. But what if we reoriented ourselves and said, well, what if we were up here and we were looking south back down towards those mountains? Well, let me just reorient this. And I can do that with the same photo. And so now we are looking from a different angle across and looking at those same features from different perspectives. So I saw this and I said, well, this is kind of amazing. And it's something that you can do, with your own photographs. So I dug in a little bit more and said, okay, well, what's the magic here? The magic is this digital elevation model. And it is a 3D computer graphics representation of the elevation data. So it is basically, it's used by these GIS systems, and it's these models, and there's earthbound ones as well as lunar ones, and there's probably ones for all the planets. It's basically a grid of a raster grid, meaning just a grid of squares of pixels, where every pixel is basically a measurement of a height at that point. So it's all the elevation information on a grid. And then when you see it like this is just a visual representation. The data is, of course, just pixels with numbers, and those numbers represent elevations. But here what we're seeing is kind of a color-coded thing so that it makes sense to us. This is a color-shaded one of the entire moon. And what we're seeing here is both the front and the back of the moon. It's basically the moon, the round moon, unfolded in two dimensions like we often see maps of the Earth. These came about from a spacecraft called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. And this orbiter was launched on an Atlas V rocket back in 2009 to the moon. And the LRO itself, as you can see in the middle picture here, contains a number of sophisticated instruments. And the ones that are of interest to us are the ones labeled 2 and 1B. Number 2 is LOLA, and LOLA is the Lunar Orbiter Laser Altimeter. And what it does is as it passes over the moon, it's sending laser pulses down, measuring the return time to those pulses and calculating, therefore, heights and distances. And it's taking, millions, and turns out billions of these kind of measurements, and its goal was to map the entire moon. Another thing that we'll talk about a little bit later, because I'm going to use it as a cheat, is the LROC WAC, which is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera, the wide angle camera. There's a couple cameras, there's a narrow and a wide angle. This one has been used to generate a very complete, full mosaic made up of tens of thousands of photos of the entire moon. I don't have enough photos in my own collection to do this with take a look at some of the places I want to take a look at. So in those cases, I'm going to go borrow NASA's information that was generated with this LROC. So where are we today? That was in 2009. 16 years later, the LRO is still orbiting. It's in a near polar orbit. It's about 50 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, the surface of the moon. And it is continuing to take all kinds of measurements, topography measurements with LOLA, high-resolution imagery. It's always updating these databases, doing temperature, illumination, radiation. Its original purpose was to provide more information for future human landings on the moon, so really understanding where are safe places to land and things like this. But the science and the data collected has gone well beyond that. Now, the real beauty of all of this stuff that I find amazing is that all of the data that is being produced here is freely available online and is published in various catalogs and places by NASA and other organizations like the US Geographical Survey. So if you go to Astropedia, that's the lunar and planetary catalog that's published here. All that LRO information, all those files can be downloaded free of charge here and used. And so here, as I've circled, if you go in and the search filter and you search on moon and you say, I want to get a digital elevation model, it will come back with the various ones that are available for use. And that middle one, oops, let me do it here, is the one I've used in this presentation. So at the start of this talk, if I had put a title up that read that kind of gobbledygook, you would have said, I have no idea what it means, but now we all know it means Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, Lunar Orbiter Laser Altimeter, Digital Elevation Model, 118 meters. And that 118 meter means that each pixel, the resolution, each pixel is about 118 meters at the equator. So here we see what it's imaged, and this is 6.5 billion measurements that were taken between July 2009 and July 2013. And as I said, it's sort of an unwrapped two-dimensional image of the moon. And this kind of projection is called an equirectangular projection, or a simple cylindrical. This is different, of course, in how we see the moon and how we image the moon. So our projection is going to be from our perspective here on Earth of an orb. And so, whereas this is very flat, we are going to have something that has a lot of curvature depending on, what we're looking at. And what the software is going to do is help us reconcile those differences. So how do we do it? If you go and download this software, like I said, it's free. The first thing that you're going to do is be intimidated, because it's very sophisticated, at least it is to me, and being not familiar with GIS. There are hundreds of menus and things like that. Fortunately, there's only about 2 or 3 places we need to click and to get things done, and the rest of it can all be ignored. So step 1 is take your photo, take the DEM, and then install these things as raster layers. So you'll go to the layer function, say I want to add a layer, I want to add a raster layer. Once those 2 layers are in, you can be looking on the screen side by side. And now you want to do an alignment. And that alignment is basically saying, well, this thing is equirectangular and this is spherical. I need to map them to each other, so I need to align them. So I'm going to start defining alignment points. And so here's a picture I've taken on the left of Tycho down towards the south of the moon. And I found the similar area on the DEM. And the little red dots are where I've manually sort of looked at one. First of all, I did is I rotated the photo so that the orientations were roughly the same to make this exercise even, possible. And then I would look carefully and find a feature on the photo, and then go over here and try and find the same feature and create these pairs, these alignment pairs. And so you can see here in the oval where I've got these 4 dots, just the nature of the different shape that I'm dealing with. Those ovals are quite different, but the information within them is the same, and that's the difference because of the projections that we're talking about. So I've got all my points aligned, and if you look just on the left here, you go through an exercise called georeferencing, and you say, okay, now that I got my alignment points, effectively stretch and bend that photo until it fits perfectly over the DEM. So the DEM is in the background, it's kind of the master layer, and now we've stretched the photo over top of it. It's now ready to be turned into a 3D model, which means let's take that information on topography from the DEM and embed it now into the photo itself. And that's done with that QGIS 2 to 3JS exporter that I mentioned. And there, as I've circled here, the exaggeration, you can define basically, well, how much exaggeration do I want in that topography? Do I want things to look very realistic? It's a 1. Or do I want the mountains to be really exaggerated? Let's make that a 3 or 5 or something like that. So you can sort of define sort of how much scale you have there, and then create the model. And there, the information has been combined, and you will now, and this now is available for you to look on a browser. So whether you're using Chrome or something like that, you'll have your 3D model and a set of motion control tools. So these motion control tools will allow you to do things to like rotate or scan or spin or whatever. And I'll show you here. You can take your photo now and zoom in, zoom out, rotate it, look at it at different angles, scan across it, pan. And that's how I did in the early one. I said, well, why don't I look at it from the other side? I basically took the thing and I just turned it completely around and created a picture from the opposite direction. And so there's my Tycho. If you remember my original picture, I said, okay, can I make an interesting photo out of this? And so my photo now of the Tycho region is more interesting, more detailed than what I had originally in my 2D space. So that's the first part. That's basically the how do you do it? What is it? When I was looking at this, I thought, what can I do with this that would be kind of interesting? And why not go back and review all the Apollo landing sites and take a look at the terrain now up close, look at that detail, look at it from different angles, and really do some 3D modeling. And as I did this, I realized what we can also do is have some fun and simulate, because of that ability to move things, simulate things like a flyover, as though you're in a spacecraft flying right over the landing sites themselves. So we'll get to a couple of those as well. So just as a recap, the Apollo lunar landings, for those of us that were around and remember it, it kind of surprised me that it was only a period of about 3.5 years that we had 6 different landings on the moon. Potentially 7 if Apollo 13 had made it, but 6 that did land from 1969 to 1972. And what's interesting, if you look at the duration of each of these missions, they got progressively longer, starting at less than a day for Apollo 11 to 1.3, 1.4, 2.79 until, a 3-day mission. In addition, the amount of work and then the number of times there were extra vehicle activities increased. So 2.5 hours of basically the astronauts walking around to the later ones were 22 hours, roaming around in the rover and on 3 multiple trips. These last 3 that had the rover were known as the J missions. They were more sophisticated in terms of the amount of scientific information they were collecting, as well as they had the rover that allowed them to, to span larger distances. The picture up here on the right shows roughly, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, where these took place. So what I wanted to do was, hey, let's look at these in detail. And what I did is I went over to that LROC WAC lunar photo mosaic, and you can find it on this NASA, like I said, everything is available. You can find it on this NASA quick map site, and you can zoom into incredible levels of detail here. What I wanted to do was cut out each of these sections, Apollo 11, 12. Basically, these are my photos. And then for each one of these photos, I'm going to get a corresponding DEM, put it together, and go through that exercise and create, let's have a look in 3D at the landing site. So let's take a look at each of these, starting at Apollo 11. So there's Apollo 11. To create this, I took the photo and then annotated onto the photo itself the circle and the number 11. I'm just letting you know that the astronauts didn't have an 11 target to aim for. I added that later here in the photo. This is, as we know, the Sea of Tranquility Base. It is, I guess, an easy first place. It looks pretty safe because it's flat, smooth terrain, not a lot of dangerous boulders and things. It was near the equator. It was well lit. And really the goal here was land somebody on the moon. If they can do that, that's success. Nearby, we can see 3 small craters that were subsequently named Aldrin, Collins, and Armstrong. Now, the fun part here is I said, let's take this picture and let's revisit it. This is what I'm going to show you is a total simulation. This is not a real video, but what I have done is I've incorporated real audio from the actual Apollo 11, and I'm going to pan over my photo as though we're flying towards where I've put an asterisk here.
Residual that is probably due to downtrack error. I'll leave it.
Right, about 20-foot residual due to downtrack area.
I think, and it was in radio.
We have data flight. Roger.
Flight Fido
Eagle,
TTC go.
It's looking good, over. GTC go. Flight control, we're go. FTP looks good. Roger.
Eagle, that looks good. Eagle, Houston, everything's looking good here, over. Roger, copy.
Roger, copy. So that's quite an effect I found of really giving the sensation, that you're flying at low altitude over the moon. The next location was Apollo 12, and this was in the Ocean of Storms. And what was really interesting about this landing is that it was a very accurate a pinpoint landing a precision landing where they landed 160 meters from the Surveyor 3 robotic lander that had landed a number of years earlier. I think it went down in 67. The Surveyor program ran from 66 to 68, and they sent a number of these unmanned robotic probes basically to determine, well, what is the surface? Is the surface hard? Can we actually land on it? Scooping up some of the dust and things like that, taking some pictures. So just kind of a reconnaissance of the ground itself to make sure, that we're not landing in quicksand, so to speak. So they landed very close to this and were able to go over to the robotic thing that had been there for a couple of years and dismantle some of it, take back the cameras and things like that. And that's the only time in history that man has gone and sort of revisit existing equipment that has been dropped on another planet. And they were looking at to compare the basaltic material of this sea, with what they had at Tranquility and see what kind of differences they had. I've circled up top here this small equator, and that's small crater, not equator, to show you kind of how close the next one, 14, is. There it is. So they were quite adjacent. And the difference being here on 14 is that they're now into some of the highland region. You can see from this roughness. So whereas they were right on the flat mirror before, now the landing is in an adjacent area that's into a rougher terrain. And this is called the Frau Mau Formation. It's the highlands. And they wanted to determine, what is the nature of this material, and is this ejected material from Mare Imbrium, which they confirmed it was, because there was a lot of debate about what is the formation, what is the genesis of a lot of the crust material. Is it volcanic? Is it from the meteor spray? Things like that. And so these missions went a long way to explain some of that. This is where Apollo 13 was originally scheduled to land. So I don't know, someone else might know the history better, whether 14 took over for 13, whether there would have been actually an additional flight, or this is just the 6 was the number. There was going to be 6 total, and it just so happened that 13 didn't make it. One of the most interesting regions to me is this. It's Apollo 15. It's the Hadley Rill. The rill is that tube-like structure that you see there, that it's a sunken area, kind of like a canal. And this is really interesting because they're flying right into something that's very geologically diverse. They are going to land, as I said, this is the first of the J missions where they're going to do a lot more scientific information. They're going to have the rover to move around. And they're flying into an area that is really a combination of mountainous. They've got a rill, they've got flat. There's a lot of interesting things to see. And this is right next to where I took my photo in Mare Imbrium. Like I said, my favorite part of the moon. So I thought this definitely deserved a flyby. And so this time, rather than listening to actual space communications, we're just going to listen to some chill music. All right. So much to see in that area. I'll be honest, I've watched that video about 100 times. After 1516, this is the Descartes highlands. And this was the first time an Apollo mission landed in what would be considered true highlands, sort of a mountainous territory. And you can actually see kind of the difference here in the coloring, that it's very bright, a much brighter white. It doesn't have that dark mare region because it is mountainous and probably different material. So here they sampled the crust material, originally believed to would be volcanic, but they actually determined that a lot of it was just the spray, the breccia, the debris from the large meteor that hit for Mare Imbrium. And so, again, confirming or enlightening the understanding of the crust and how the moon had been formed. So an interesting spot. 17, I think, is the most sophisticated of the landing areas. This was the final of the missions. This was the last. It was the most ambitious mission. It was the longest EVAs and the greatest number of samples. They brought back something like 60 kilograms of samples. This mission also carried the first true scientist astronaut to the moon. Up to this point, although the astronauts were extremely well trained in geology and chemistry and physics and things like that, they were tended to be engineers. In this case, Harrison Schmitt was a geologist, a PhD, I think he was a university professor geologist who went up there. And he made probably one of the most astounding discoveries of all the missions that went up when he found organic volcanic glass. And finding that glass taught a lot about early volcanic eruptions that had occurred. And so what we're going to do here now is we're going to hover in the air above this. We're going to circle around, but we're going to tune in and listen as astronaut Harrison Schmitt steps out and discovers that there's a lot of orange soil around, and he gets quite excited. That guy's enthusiasm is great. And if I write a book about this, the title's I Gotta Dig a Trench, Houston. It's fun. That's a great line for a book. And so that is it. That's the missions. Thank you for that, for watching here. These are some microscopic views of the lunar volcanic glass that he found. It turns out that what had happened is there had been some volcanic eruptions. The material came up and cooled instantly and sort of turned to this glass material, settled down, and then had remained buried for millions of years until right in the region where they were, a small crater, a crater known as Shorty, basically hit, impacted, and uncovered some of this. And so if you want to go down your own rabbit hole, just start here, and you'll get into all kinds of pictures that were taken, you know, of the orange soil, perhaps the trench he dug as well. So thanks very much. Time for questions or?
Thanks so much. It was a very interesting talk.
Thanks.
Any issue with there's a clear, very significant difference between the LROC images, resolution-wise, and the DEM. Do you find any problems with that?
So the resolution, if I take my photo, which has a limited resolution, and I go through the process with a DEM, the DEM is a higher resolution, and you will actually improve the resolution of your own image.
Okay.
So it imparts, you know, some of that resolution improvement to your image, just to the nature that you are very accurately sort of bending and moving things according to the altitudes that have been measured. Now, the LROC has been photographed at a much higher resolution than I'm capable of, than any of us are capable here on Earth. And so between the two, you're getting just an almost perfect sort of quality of the two, more so than you can get, you know, from your own photos.
So basically, the only issue would be that you can't zoom in sort of down to meter resolution on your model. You
pretty much, I mean, in some cases, I'm zooming in a fair amount.
Yeah.
With the, if you want to if you say to yourself, hey, I'd like to do something like this, and I really want to get the best quality images possible, then you would go to those LROC images, because you can really just keep zooming in on them to very, very high resolution, probably more so than I did here.
Yeah, the first time I tried out the LROC, I was actually looking for something else, and I found a crater named Snowman.
Okay.
I thought, like, where the heck did that come from? And you start zooming in and zooming in, and you can see the tracks of the astronauts and the rovers around on the surface.
Yeah, there's two, what you were probably in, there were two cameras. There's the WAC and the NAC.
Yeah.
And the WAC is the wide area, and that was used to create the full moon mosaic. And the NAC is the narrow band, which was used for these very high, you know, where you can go right in and see, in some of those, you can see the remains of the actual vehicles that are still there.
Yeah.
That's not what I was using here. I was just using the mosaic of the moon in order to grab images. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
When using your own pictures, Malcolm, would you want your pictures to err on the side of not blowing highlights or not clipping shadows? Just because quite often with my lunar images, you pick one or the other, but you don't get both.
Not really sure what the best approach would be. You're going to get, like I said, an improvement in resolution from the DEM itself. So I think you're going to have a bit more latitude on erring on the highlights and things. I think you're going to have a little more latitude on both of those because the DEM is going to help sort of bring out the relief associated with them. So I guess the best answer I would say is try to do neither, like balanced as much as possible. If you're not getting, brilliant results on one or the other, don't worry too much because the DEM is going to enhance it.
Any other? Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. That was wonderful, Malcolm. All right. So next up are our observation reports. And if you folks that are showing stuff could possibly get in the queue sort of at the corner here, we can start with that. First up is Jim.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
All right. So this is part of the North American Nebula showing the Cygnus Wall, the bright reddish ridge, which is approximately 20 light years long, and it's composed of ionized hydrogen and sulfur. And it's a region of active star formation and intense radiation in the constellation Cygnus. This is a 14-minute stacked exposure using Deep Sky Stacker taken with the newly acquired Malincam 8300 color camera. I also used the William Optics 61mm refractor, which with reducer and flattener at f4.7. And along with that, the light pollution filter that I used for this image was the Ideas NBX. Post-processing was Affinity Photo 2. And the mosquitoes that night were brutal. Really brutal. Okay, next one. This is a wide-angle shot taken with the same camera of M57, the Ring Nebula in Lyra, over 2,200 light years away. Using the 94mm sharp star refractor, this planetary appears in the wider context of the surrounding sky and shows up very well, like a little gem. This solar animation was taken with the ZWO ASI 174 monochrome camera using fire capture software and processed with IMPPG and Affinity Photo 2. Here we see the natural solar surface details, an active region erupting on the lower right, surrounding the pair of sunspots, as you can see, and a good deal of prominence movement with varied plasma density. This was taken over a 65-minute period in the late morning of May the 28th, a while back. And I was fortunate to be able to image an area of the sun showing surface and prominence activity together. As you can see, the animation goes forward and then repeats. This is the only animation I've taken of the complete solar disk, showing various prominence activity in different locations. By removing the Telview 2X Barlow lens that I typically use for close-ups, I was able to capture the complete disk with the camera that I was using, ZWO-174 monochrome. The processing was done in IMPPG for the inversion technique, highlighting the prominence, the surface details that you see, the filaments. And I used Affinity Photo 2 for color. The animation goes forward and backward continually, and the actual time span for this animation is 1 hour. And lastly, this is an example, an illustration of what you get when you see a cool prominence and capture it over a 70-minute period, despite the clouds passing by. And then afterward discovered this reflecting unwanted light showing up after the processing was done. Live and learn. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Wonderful work there. All right, Bob. The big one, unless you want to point something out.
Okay, super.
All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Let's start off with 3 globular clusters that are all up around Hercules, and that's sort of in that keystone area of the sky. And they get bigger and bigger. This is M92, and the next one is M13, which is the sort of the gem for globular clusters in the northern hemisphere. This is, you know, some people say they can see it naked eye. You can certainly see it in binoculars. And this is the 3 of them all together, just to show you how the different sizes of them. And when I sent this off to Chris Terran, I very cleverly called it 4 globular clusters. And I wish I could tell you that that was intentionally as a joke. It was a mistake. I can't count to 3 anymore. This is the Butterfly Nebula, and it doesn't look like a butterfly to me at all, but I think I'm too zoomed in. If I had a wider angle, this picture here is less than a degree across. You'd probably need more. This is one of my favorites, the Fireworks Galaxy, and you can see that it's bright enough and sparkly enough to probably deserve the term. And this is NGC 6979, which I thought was the triangular. What was it called here? The Pickering's Triangle. How do I go back to the other one here?
yes.
Anyway, it's not. And I knew what Pickering's Triangle looked like, so I recognized that I had imaged the wrong thing. And this is Pickering's Triangle, which doesn't have an NGC number. So I just basically looked it up and wrote the numbers down. This is all part of the Veil Nebula. And this is where they actually are. Pickering's Triangle being there and NGC 6979 just a little off to the side. And that's basically the whole veil. At one time I thought I would obviously my telescopes can't image this, it's too big, but I could take it as a mosaic, and I took 3 or 4 and got bored. And this is my last image. This is the obviously correctly named Cave Nebula. Thank you very much.
All right, Malcolm. Long time no see.
Right, hi again. I have three nebulas that I want to show that were all taken in the last 10 days of July. So just, a couple of weeks ago, where we had that nice spate of clear skies before the smoke arrived. I actually tried to take pictures once the smoke arrived, but it was not possible. But here I'm going to be able to photograph a emission nebula, which you see here, a reflection nebula, and a planetary nebula, and got those, all three of them, which was kind of a bonus given all the cloudy nights that we've had. This is the Wizard Nebula. It's an emission nebula in Cepheus, and the color palette here is SHO, so I was shooting this narrowband. All of these were taken with my 140 millimeter refractor and a mono ASI 2600 mono camera. So in some cases it's narrowband, some cases it's broadband, but in all cases I was shooting narrowband. The second one is the Iris Nebula, and it's really, there's two things going on here. The Iris Nebula is the blue iris-like feature in the middle, but it's in amongst a large molecular cloud around the outside. That's an LBN number that's hidden behind the screen up here. And so this being a reflection nebula means it's not actually emitting its own wavelengths. And so shooting this in RGB in color makes sense. So I shot this with LRGB. And lastly is the Dumbbell Nebula, and this is a planetary nebula, which means it's the remains of the shell of a mid-sized star, probably about 10 times the mass of the Earth, that has collapsed and now is a white dwarf at the center of this that's causing the energy to irradiate and cause those gases to glow. There's really two sets of predominant gases here. There's hydrogen, which shows here as red, and oxygen is blue. And so it's, I only imaged at those two wavelengths, and this is an HOO narrowband image. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Tony.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I think 2 weeks ago, we had a new moon and some nice clear skies. And I got away to the Madawaska Valley up near Barry's Bay. Some nice dark skies. I thought I'd try a difficult broadband target. And so this is a dark nebula, the Seahorse Nebula in Cepheus. About a night's worth of color imaging with some processing and PixInsight. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. If you can see just at the bottom here, some hydrogen emission nebula. This is actually the Flying Bat Nebula that I think I presented a month ago. So maybe one day I'll sort of stitch them all together, and it'll be a big mosaic. And next one. So I came back to Ottawa, and maybe I caught the dark nebula bug, because a few days later I went out to Flow and tried another one. This is the E Nebula. Again, it's a Barnard's dark nebula. You can just kind of pretend that you can sort of see an E shape here. It's quite difficult to process, but I think I got a little bit of the smoky dustiness in the dark nebula, and a very rich star field there is quite pleasing. Next, so I figured there might be a few presentations of the July Challenge objects, and my photos, my images were all from last year, so I thought I'd give a little report of going out to Flow and trying to see them visually. So I started with the North American Nebula, and this is all in the 18-inch Star Master. To begin with, I wasn't sure that I could see the North American Nebula, but then I realized that this is such a large target that I was almost seeing the whole field of view was just nebula. And it wasn't until I started scanning back and forth a little bit that I could tell that I was seeing dark and light and so on. And I think I was looking maybe just at this little region of the Cygnus wall, kind of this elongated shape. And once you sort of saw what was going on, then you could see quite a lot. In the Veil Nebula, so if you haven't been out to see it, the east and west side show up very, very beautifully with a nebula filter. And in fact, what I've sketched there is, I think, the western side. I scanned over, and just at the very limit of what I could see, I could make out the triangular, Fleming's Triangular Wisp Nebula. I felt like it was just a little bit too dark to sketch. If I could see what I was sketching, then I feel like my image, my night vision would have been blown out. Butterfly Nebula, I tried hard. I got the filters in, I sort of scanned back and forth. But I think as Richard predicted, I couldn't see it. I do see that it's in one of the RASC observing challenges, so presumably with the right conditions, you would be able to see it. And finally, I think we had 3 consecutive clear nights. So I imaged in narrowband this interesting spot in Cassiopeia. On the right-hand side, the Lobster Nebula, Lobster Claw. You can sort of see very clearly. It's got a nice claw shape. And it's kind of blown out a little bit, but this is the Bubble Nebula, which I think is a popular imaging target. If you're counting sharpless emission objects, there are sort of 5 regions. There's 3 big hydrogen emission areas, and then these 2 bright ones are their own little sharpless objects. Also M52 open cluster down here. There's another NGC open cluster up there. Quite an interesting part of the sky to image. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Wonderful work. All right, Taras. There you are.
First image was occultation with lunar occultation with Mars. It was taken from North Frontenac Dark Sky Preserve in July 25th, if I'm not mistaken. The moon was quite low already, and it started right after the sunset. So for the time when I set up, the planet already moved a bit further, but about an hour ago before that, it was a bit closer, and I tried to adjust the exposure such a way that you could see a bit of Earth shine reflected, the light of Earth reflected on the surface of Moon. There are a bit clouds, so I just wanted to show this picture as one of the last sights for the Mars before it approached the Sun from our point of view. And we'll have to wait now for a couple of months before it's visible again. July 26th, yeah, it was the same night, but the morning was quite good seeing. Yeah, it was July 26th. Quite good seeing from, I think I got my dates confused. So the occultation was a few days later, and this was July 26th, and the location was Fred Lossing Observatory. So I used 18-inch refractor to image the planets, and around maybe 3 a.m., Venus was already high enough so I can image the planet, but the seeing condition was extremely good, which was very rare in our case for our latitudes. And why I'm showing this image, because it's the first time that actually in a visual band, you could see a little bit of cloud pattern on Venus in visual. I adjusted exposures so that I would see them in the individual channels, and I used the monochrome camera, so the image is composed of sequential imaging of RGB. If you squint your eyes, you can see a bit of this kind of pattern in blue channel, probably a bit in green as well. So the composed image did have a bit of the Venus clouds shown on it. Now there is a filter with 350 nanometer bandwidth, which allows you to image the clouds on Venus. And I used that filter that night as well. So to compose this image, I used the red channel as it was. I imaged the green, but for blue, I used the image from the UV filter. So essentially, 350 millimeter corresponds to the ultraviolet band. And at that frequency, or rather at that wavelength, you can see the patterns of Venetian clouds showing up quite clearly. But the problem is that it's really susceptible to the seeing conditions, and I had to stack quite a few images to get this, which if combined, resulted in this image. So I combined here the original green plus 60%, 40% of the green image plus 60% of this UV to get this image. I just kind of tried to mix the two in a sequence of one slide changing the other to see if they match, if there is any visual reference to the pattern of clouds, but they not necessarily match. So the problem is that the amount of sun which falls in this direction on Venus is overwhelming this V-shape type of pattern that the clouds have, while the infrared clearly shows it. So you can still see a little bit of match of here near the poles, but other than that, it's not necessarily exactly the same image. Same night, there was, or right before I imaged Venus, there was nice seeing conditions for imaging Saturn. Not sure if I'd be able to see, but the moons of Saturn were quite nicely aligned, I believe. You can see a bit of Titan here. There is one moon here, and there was a line of others, but I guess the screen is a bit too dark. So that was just a night with good condition, but as you saw, Titan close to the surface, and it's not really an accident, because there is now these days there is events when the Saturn is actually dropping the shadow on the surface of, Titan dropping the shadow on the surface of Titan, of Saturn. And it happens every 16 days with 4 more cycles like this to go. So on August 3rd was one of such occasions, and I caught this around 4 o'clock in the morning as an event difficult to miss. There is still 4 more occurrences like this with the span, as I mentioned, 16 days, which is a rotation period, orbital period of Titan rotating around. So there is a chance to see that on 19th. And I composed, this is actually equivalent of 45-minute sequential exposures. This is 30 frames with a span of 90 seconds each. Again, you can see clearly there is a little Titan passing by here, casting the shadow on the surface of Saturn. Thank you.
Oh, my turn. All right, I got a few three targets that I've been after. You've heard various comments about the clarity of the sky in July. We did have a nice span of relatively clear nights there, but I found that, at least in my neck of the woods, they were also dogged by the haze and the smoke that's in the sky there. And so it made for some rather poor seeing out my way. Anyway, still conditions were good enough to allow me to chase this thing that I've been after for a while. And if you think it's that streak that you see there, no, that's just one of Elon Musk's Blightites. The, the thing I was after is actually at the center of this frame, and that's Comet Atlas, the third interstellar object known to enter our solar system. This was taken on July 31st, so just last week. And I've been watching this guy. July, I ran some numbers on my planetary programs and found that with the configuration of my observatory and my surrounding terrain with trees and stuff, that really July was my only month where I could actually have a peek at this. So I actually imaged this comet on its inbound journey to its rendezvous with the sun several times in July. I think I got it on about 8 different sessions there. So we did have a string of nice nights there. But as you can see, it's for us mere mortals, it's just a dot. It's an interesting object there. It is really speeding in at about 66 kilometers per second. Towards its perihelion with a date on the sun, which is October the 26th. Unfortunately, that'll be on the opposite side of the sun for us here on Earth, and we won't get a chance to see it. I actually ran some more numbers. I won't be able to see this thing again until about middle of November sometime. Down in the bottom left, you can see Hubble telescope images. So even with the Hubble, it's not much more than a bright point, but Hubble was able to obviously capture the coma that has started to develop around this comet. And with the research that's going on, this is intensely interesting for especially the professional astronomical community. So a number of instruments have been used to observe this, different wavelengths and such. And what they've determined is that it most likely, it certainly is a comet. It's not an alien spacecraft or anything, unless it's got a really good disguise going. But it's a comet that's inbound, and it's about 7 miles in diameter, about 12 kilometers in diameter, making it the largest of the 3 interstellar objects that we know of since the Oumuamua object back a few years back in 2017. So anyway, the images above were all taken. All my images were taken with the 11-inch Edge HD at f10. The upper row is taken with an ASI 2600 monochrome camera. So these are just luminance frames. There's no color here. My last shot at this before the trees started skunking me was down at the lower right, and it's a bit of a magnification from what you saw before. And I managed to bag it in with the color camera, the ASI 294. So it's got a slight tinge of green to it, but yeah, it's not much more than a dot. And we'll see what happens after it rounds the sun and see how bright it actually gets. This is still hanging in around magnitude 17, so it's not a bright object. All right. And just as Taras was mentioning, the Titan shadow on transit, I caught it on July the 18th. Seeing was absolutely awful, but transits don't wait, so you got to take what you get. This is actually a stack of 30 out of 3,000 images, the best 30. And I also integrated 30 out of 3,000 near infrared images, which I used for luminance and the color that helped to bring out some of the detail and helped to mitigate some of the really terrible seeing that was going on in my neck of the woods that night. But shooting lots of frames and just choosing the best ones and working with them does allow you to extract some data, and you can clearly see Titan here and Titan's shadow moving across the disk. By the way, Taras, I tried August the 3rd. I got skunked by clouds, so I'm waiting for the next one next week. All right. And finally, on July the 14th, a supernova was discovered. Up here in the Northern Hemisphere, we've been griping because folks in the Southern Hemisphere have been treated to 2 novas this year, and quite apparently fairly easily to observe objects. We didn't get any. We're still waiting for T-Core Borealis to blow its top, and it hasn't done that yet. But we didn't get novas, but we got a supernova. Yeah, we got supernova on the July 14th up in galaxy NGC 7331. For those of you familiar with observing, this is the large spiral galaxy, believed to be rather similar to our own Milky Way, that's up near Stephan's Quintet. And it's surrounded by a retinue of other galaxies. You can see 3 of them at the top there, but these are not related to 7331. They're about 4 times further away. So this is 7331 on the 14th, or about a week after after it was discovered. May be hard for you to see. So what I've done is I did an extreme histogram stretch just of the central region. You can see that's where the supernova is itself, and you can see it's a very bright dot, but it's also very close to the galactic nucleus there. So I did an extreme stretch of the histogram to make it a bit more obvious. And you can see it here. I'm going to zoom in here in a second, give you a bit of a closer look. But just to let you know, this galaxy is estimated to be about 40 to 50 million light years from us. And all the stars that you see here are all just foreground objects in our own galaxy, you know, typically 50 to maybe 100 or so light years distant from us. So quite a difference in the distance there. I'll zoom in on my last slide there. And so this is just the core region of the galaxy, and it makes the supernova much more obvious there. The fuzzy core of this galaxy, like our own Milky Way, that light's generated by tens of billions of stars in a fairly compact region, giving you that overall central glow, much brighter than the surrounding spiral arms. And the supernova itself is the glow of one exploded star. So this is a type, has been determined to be a type 1A supernova, which means that in the system where this occurred, it was probably a binary star system with a white dwarf circling a larger star, basically siphoning off matter from the larger star until the point where so much matter accumulates on the outer surface of the white dwarf that a nuclear explosion basically happens, and it blows itself to pieces there. As you can see, so this, as I mentioned, those few stars that you see here, they're all foreground objects in our own Milky Way. That one supernova is on the order of 1 million times farther away than those. And so it's the light of one star 1 million times farther away that's blown its top. So I found that quite an interesting object. That supernova, if you want to check that out, is still visible in 7331. It will obviously eventually fade as the material expands out from the explosion area, and it will dim. But it's an interesting object. It's a nice bright galaxy to have a look at. You can make this visually. I found this was very easy to see visually when you were zoomed in on this object. So check it out while you can. All right. I think that's the last of them for me. All right, Richard isn't with us tonight, so I'm going to move right into the observing challenges that he's laid out last month. As you saw from a number of the images that were presented tonight, we had his focus was on the constellation Cygnus, with things like the North American Nebula and Fleming's Triangular Wisp, the Butterfly Nebula. We also saw Saturn from myself and from Taras. Richard also wanted to add the commendations that Mark Lithenthal got some good pictures of the Veil Nebula and posted them on Discord. And then Taras got a couple of nice pictures of Saturn, which you've also seen. So gold stars to those observers. This month's challenges are the constellation Vulpecula. And you can see that this is also in the area of the Milky Way. This is a wide-angle view. The Vulpecula itself, it doesn't have a lot of stars to it, but the interesting thing are the 3 objects that he's labeled here, which are your challenge objects. They're the Mothra cluster, the Vulpecular cluster, and NGC 6823. I think he's got them here. Yeah. So another cluster, and they're all in the same area, so you can easily observe these on one night if you get a clear enough evening for them. So these will be posted up on Astronotes, so you don't have to be busy jotting them down. He also wanted to mention that we've got some interesting sidebar items there. There's a conjunction at dawn on August the 12th, close proximity of Venus and Jupiter. And then we also have about a week later, we have Venus, the Moon, and the two main stars of constellation Gemini, Pollux and Castor, in close proximity to one another. So those are your challenges for next month. Just a notice on public star parties. We did have finally a successful one on July the 18th. We didn't get rained out or clouded out. So that went well. The next one is August the 29th. And again, these are at the HARP site, the Diefenbunker. And there's the map for it. Here's the details. August the 29th, and we are looking for volunteers to help out. When these events have gone on successfully over the last while, they've been well attended. So we can certainly use volunteers to, either bring their telescopes or help with things like traffic control and just helping people out getting in locations and such. If you're interested and available to help, it would be much appreciated. And just give Deepinder Babar an email. You can reach him at starparties@ottawa.rasc.ca. So we would appreciate your helping out on that if possible. Then we have our members only, our star parties up at the Fred Lossing Observatory, where we have our 3 telescopes. And again, July 27th was successful. We had a clear night. Again, seeing has been kind of marginal, and mosquitoes were probably out there, but I think our mitigation system with the mosquitoes, at least last time I was out there, does quite well. It seems to keep them at bay. So August the 23rd, new moon, is the next date for our FLO star party. And again, this is for members only. Okay, Estelle is here tonight. Estelle, did you get the doors unlocked? Super. We were having a bit of problems with the doors on the library. So Estelle is here, and her pick of the month is Summer Stargazing. This is an awesome book, especially if you're relatively new to observing. This is it's one of Terence Dickinson's work. He was always very methodical in putting together his stuff. This is a beautiful reference. He's got a lot of detailed photographs, wide-angle photographs of areas, especially along the Milky Way, that are very helpful, especially if you're not familiar with the summer sky there. And I mean, summer in terms of the rich stuff that you can see with binoculars and visually, just summer it's hard to beat. The nights are short, the mosquitoes can be bad, but summer is definitely the time to check out the Milky Way. And this guide is a super useful help. So it's Estelle's pick of the month. Oh, and one other notice here. Bernie Hasselman will be setting up a training session for laser pointer training. He mentioned this previously. This is only for RASC members, and you have to be a member in good standing for at least 2 years, because this is a bit more of an official thing that we're promoting. And that 2-year thing that comes from our national policy. So if you're interested in signing up for Bernie's laser training session, you can reach him at LPA at rasc.ottawa.ca and for attendance information. I don't know if he's limiting the number of folks there, but you might want to touch base with him. This is very useful training, especially these days with people abusing lasers and all manner of things. So this teaches you the proper way to handle things. You're trained, you have a certificate for that. And so always remember, learn and practice laser point safety to avoid nasty consequences, right? And they can be nasty if you abuse this tool. All right. So finally, just for club information, if you're interested about something to do with FLO, you want to ask questions, Rick is the guy to ask. Stella also mentioned and already mentioned is our book librarian. Peter Shute for the telescope library, if you're loan library, if you're interested in borrowing a scope to test it out. And RASC membership, you can contact Art Fraser if you have any information or if you have any questions, sorry. So thanks for coming. Interesting talks tonight. I appreciate the efforts put forward by our presenters. We had XX members.
We have
I think that's 20 in Roman,
and
but I'm sure we had
on
more
Zoom.
than that. We had lots. So thank you for coming out, and thank you for everybody that contributed with their presentations and their images. And as usual, we will have our post-meeting meeting for those that are interested at Liam McGuire's down on Saint Laurent at 1705 Saint Laurent. And the next meeting, just to let you know, is September the 5th. I know that some of you may have been uncertain with the dates there because there was a little bit there's a little bit of a float going on there with CASM in terms of the dates there, but it is finalized. We will be meeting September the 5th at 7:30. And again, if you have any ideas or observations or just comments that you'd like to make on the meeting in general, feel free to contact me, Paul Klauninger, at meetingchair@ottawa.rasc.ca. And a reminder, as you stream out there, the rest of the museum is closed for us. So we'll see you next month. Clear skies to all, and enjoy the rest of the summer. Thank you.